Thank you. And I had originally planned a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation, which I'm going to try to condense very quickly, so I'll talk quickly. First of all, thank you for having us. Very pleased to be here. My two campaign chairmen are actually from Miami, Oklahoma, Steve and Tinker Owens. So Miami, we're obviously thinking that is a big town for us. We look forward to getting to meet with you and talk with you more about the particular issues. My background is finance, accounting, and economics, business major, basically. The reason I got into the race is because of our financial crisis. And our financial crisis is going to encompass every one of us, and it's basically going to do away with the Main Street as we know it, unless we get control of our debt, our deficit, our spending, and our runaway government. So, real quickly, I'm going to dispense with the bio and kind of go into this very quickly, but first of all, basically the three things I really want to talk about is our monetary policy and our government spending and everything and what's going on and what's wrong. Obviously, we know that our government is out of control, but so is our monetary policy and our Federal Reserve System that we know pretty much as well. Our government spending has gone to extreme excess. And then once we talk about all this, what is the path to right-sizing our government? So is our spending out of control? I think we can look at this chart and see very quickly. Our spending is out of control. You see the amount of red over here. Last year, the Bush administration, all 3 years of Barack Hussein Obama's administration. And obviously, looking at here, you see, well, it says he balanced the budget in these years. I would actually argue he did not. And the reason why is we still took money out of Social Security fund in those years. So definitely, spending definitely out of control. Anybody here think it is not out of control? Is our government debt out of control? The spending is one thing, but it's the accumulated debt that threatens our country and our viability. Here's our debt. Don't even really see it show up until about World War II. Over here, we basically outspend the Russians and put ourselves into a situation where we don't have the Red Menace anymore. But right here is where Mr. Obama takes office. And you can see that we basically see an increased point in that curve for the amount of debt that we've accumulated. And this amount of blue just about equals all the other blue. So you can see that we're in definite troubles when it comes to that. What was the gold standard? Most people don't know that the United States was one of the countries that also established the gold standard at the end of World War II. In 1945, we created something called the Bretton Woods system. It's called that because they met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. And most of the countries picked a bullion to back their currency. The United States picked gold. France, I think, picked silver. Some of the African nations picked platinum. But the point was that something backed up the currency. That worked fine until one nation decided to get off. Anybody know who it was? It would be the United States of America. Unfortunately, a Republican president took us off of the gold standard. Since then, our dollar became what we call a fiat currency. It means that it only has value because, why? Our government says it has value. Other than that, it's basically paper. Quantity theory of money. Money can lose its value through excessive abundance. The more you print, the less it's worth. And then talk about the Federal Reserve Act. Created 12 Federal Reserve banks. Most people don't know this, but the Senate author of the Federal Reserve Act was one of Oklahoma's 2 U.S. senators. A guy named Robert Latham Owen. George was actually the founder of the First National Bank of Mississippi, believe it or not, so we won't blame you for that. 7-member board appointed by the president. Unfortunately, right now, 5 of those appointees have been under Mr. Obama. Created Federal Reserve notes, we talked about that. Money that is not redeemable for gold or silver. Here's the problem. The Federal Reserve currently has the ability to, number 1, print money, but number 2, to take that money that was paper just a few minutes ago and buy government-backed securities. Last year, they bought 61% of our own securities. Just the snaking its tail or whatever. And then they can also set the discount rate on them. Does anybody see a conflict of interest with these 3 entities, these 3 things being done by one entity? Obviously. And then some question whether Congress has the ability, has the power to delegate its authority to coin money to the Federal Reserve, which is obviously not a constitutional entity. Interest rates versus inflation. Printing additional money by the Federal Reserve creates inflation as the money devalues. Our money is devalued now about 53 cents to the British pound sterling, which is not good if you go to England. Inflation then causes interest rates to rise. Since 2010, the Federal Reserve has increased the monetary supply. This is actually now 1.9 trillion. I did this in September. It's gone up since then. So why has not major inflation occurred? Now, we've had inflation. So we've had inflation on things like gas, we've had inflation on food, but the government has artificially basically kept inflation almost at zero, actually 1.2%, which obviously now could cause a major cataclysm if it jumps up. And here's the danger of hyperinflation. This guy looks a little German to us, doesn't he? But the Weimar Republic was the government that existed between World War I and Adolf Hitler taking control of Germany. And look at the similarities to what happened to the Weimar Republic in those 10 or so years to the United States today. No currency backing by bullion, excess currency printing, guilty again, devaluation of the dollar, we've been doing that as well, excess government borrowing, and then finally, out of control government spending. Sound familiar? We're doing all those things. Federal government spending, two types of government spending. Mandatory, must be spent by law, plus we do have to pay the interest on our debt. That's part of the problem, is we do have to pay that interest on the debt, or we default. Discretionary, must receive an annual authorization. I'll give you one guess where all of our military spending goes. It's always under discretion. Here's our budget, just about $4 trillion. Mandatory, about $2.5 trillion. This is actually last year's budget. Discretionary, $1.24 trillion. Interest on the debt, only $242 billion. And the reason that's low is because our interest rates are at 0.28 basis points. We actually have almost, money should have more value than nothing. And that's kind of where we are. But here's the bigger problem. If interest goes back to, say, 5%, this number goes to $1 trillion. Whoops, there goes all your discretionary spending. Who owns our debt? Asia owns a big portion. The rest of it is owned to ourselves. What are we spending our money on? This is the part where I ask you to reach under your chair and pull out the barf bag, because this is not pretty. Earmarks by members of Congress, about $20 billion. Earned income tax welfare payments. These are the people who got a refund that paid no income tax. And remember, 46% of Americans pay no federal income tax. U.S. Department of Education, $80 billion. We didn't even have a U.S. Department of Education when I graduated high school, so why do we need it? Fraud from Hurricane Katrina. Now, this is not the money that we're still paying on Hurricane Katrina. It's just the fraud. These are the people that were in Iowa, or someplace like that are still getting money. Resanding beaches at U.S. resorts. I know all you guys had a good team, but unfortunately, I don't think that's Holiday Inn's problem. I think it's our problem. Pentagon inefficiencies and cost overruns. That's a big one. Almost $300 billion. Another one here: refusal of government employees to fly coach. That's a problem. Advertising to promote food stamp usage. You saw today what Frank Lucas is trying to cut food stamps, or at least the stimulus portion of that. Funding to promote the Kennedy family legacy, that $146 billion. I don't see that we're funding anything for Reagan or Mary Jo Pettigrew or any of those people. Medicaid and incarceration costs of illegal aliens, $133 billion. And then finally, Government Accounting Office estimate of duplicate programs. These are programs that we have an exact duplicate either at the federal, state, or state level, $123 billion, and that came from programs back in July. And then here's one that I'll make you all sick. Government Accounting Office estimates that 22% of all federal programs fail to show any positive impact on the populations they serve. I'm going to skip through this because I'm running short on time. The point of this slide was basically, people say we can't balance the budget right now, but Oklahoma didn't have a balanced budget until 1939. During our deepest, darkest times of the Dust Bowl, we passed the balanced budget then. So wouldn't you think the United States would do the same during kind of a down times? And this one, other nations, what are they doing? Basically, Poland adopted a balanced budget amendment in 1997. Switzerland amended their constitution in 2001. Germany amended their constitution in 2009. And then finally, Spain, you always hear that it's Greece and Spain, but Spain amended their constitution just last month. So these other companies are trying to reform themselves. We certainly need to do the same. And then finally, last slide, path to recovery and balance. How do we fix this? Number one, we return to market-based economics and monetary policy. Number two, we enact the balanced budget amendment. We've got to enact the balanced budget amendment. Don't trust any politician to not balance that budget. Third, in congressional earmarks, obviously a point. Line item veto, some people don't like this, but I served under a Democrat and a Republican governor. I saw both of those governors use the line item veto to restrain spending. I think that's one we do. This one's a big one, and I know a lot of folks have jumped on this as well, but institute a sunset or an expiration date of all federal programs. The problem we have is that government never dies. It grows back. You mow the weeds out of your yard, they grow back. We need some sort of methodology where government programs die. And if you set up a situation where they expire after 5 or 10 years, they will go away. And then finally, the three big things that Obama has done that have killed our business and environment. Obamacare, a $1.7 trillion tax increase. Dodd-Frank is penalizing all of our community banks, not allowing them to lend money. And the EPA regs that threaten to shut down not only our oil and gas industry, but also our coal industry. And then finally, right-size government to its original functions. If it's not constitutional, it's not a constitutional right of the federal government, do away. Again, I'm sorry I ran so long, but I'd be happy to answer your questions if you.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna, if anybody has any questions for him, just contact him after all the candidates are done speaking. And thank you again, Mr. Pettigrew.